Hello and happy new year everybody. I hope you had a good start of the year, and as it's usual in this time at the beginning, it's time for New Year's resolutions. I don't know if you make these, I used to make them, and what I learned is that these New Year's resolutions, they don't work unless you make them a habit. So if you are one of those people who actually makes New Year's resolutions, I would suggest making them a habit. Now, when it comes to chess, well, there are many useful habits that we can make and create. And one of these, I think, which I try to make them doable and easily achievable, is to try to dedicate some time to chess, to a constructive activity. Whether that be studying endgames, whether that be studying openings, calculation, reading books, blindfolded, whatever it is, try to make it achievable and, make it a habit. And then after a while, you will see some changes and good ones as well. Otherwise, from my experience at least, by February, I've forgotten all about the New Year's resolutions. And well, that's the end of it. Now, when it comes to chess, I think what's best for pretty much everybody is when the chess flows smoothly. Now, smooth chess is something I always aspire to, but I don't always manage it. So, in today's video, I'll try to keep it light and easy for the start of the year. I would like to show you one of the best or the smoothest games I have ever played. And by showing you this game and explaining it, I will try to also convey this idea of smoothness and what it actually means for chess. So, without further ado, let me show you what I mean, and then hopefully at the end you will see why I wish to all of you in 2025 a smooth chess. This game was played at the Open tournament in Balaguer in 2005 against a woman grandmaster. So I was playing with the black pieces, and the game started with d4, knight f6, knight f3, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, and now c5. Well, the semi-tarrasch has always been sort of like my secret weapon ever since the, I would say, somewhere early 90s or something. And probably you could guess that I was inspired to study this opening after seeing Bobby Fischer's games when he was quite successful with this opening. But then again, Bobby Fischer was successful with pretty much any opening he played. I had a kind of a mixed fate with the semi-tarrasch. I was always happy to play it, but my results were sometimes, not that great. The good part about it was that in those times, 90s, early noughties, nobody was really paying serious attention to it. It was not considered like a main defense and so forth. Of course, this changed sometime later when Vladimir Kramnik relaunched it at elite level, and even I think that was 2013 at the Candidates tournament in London. And after that, basically, it's a mainstream opening up to this day. But in those days, 2005, it was still kind of a rare thing. So when I wanted to surprise my opponents, I would often employ it. So she played c takes d5, knight takes d5, and now she played the move e3. Of course, the main alternative is the move e4. And in fact, this is where I had my, a bit worse results, because the positions after knight c3, bc3, cd, cd, then bishop b4 check, bishop d2, takes, and castle. These positions with this mobile center by white, I did not always treat them so well from the black side. And okay, a bit of going on a tangent here. The similar positions even in the Grunfeld, like with g6 and bishop g7, with the fianchettoed bishop, I would sometimes find myself feeling uncomfortable. And that kind of led me to evolve in my understanding of the openings I would employ, and then I switched to some openings where I would have more space in the center. But okay, let's go back. She played e3, and now black actually has a choice whether to which type of a structure to choose. So after moves like knight c6, bishop d3, bishop e7, castles, and a move like, let's say, a3, a useful move to cover the b4 square. Black can choose whether to play against an IQP after cd4, ed4, okay, or to choose this more like a, let's call it Queen's Indian setup after knight takes c3, bc3, and b6. And this is what I chose because I was, like I say, attracted to these positions, even though, as you will see very soon, we will have this pawn center e4 and d4 pawns where, like I said, sometimes, not always, I would kind of misplay it and not feel comfortable there. But in this particular case, actually, I felt quite good about it. So I took knight c3, bc3, b6, bishop b2, bishop b7, and now e4. So white builds the full center, which is what she's supposed to do. cd4, cd4, and now bishop f6. And from this moment, I will start explaining the, let's say, the smoothness that I think I also felt it during the game, and how it translated to the board. So the move bishop f6 is a kind of a standard one for black in these structures, and the point is, of course, to put pressure on the pawn on d4 and provoke e5, okay, as white will play. And then, yes, black will lose a tempo by dropping the bishop back, but will obtain access of the d5 square, and it will open the long diagonal for the bishop. So normally it's a good trade, unless something concretely doesn't work for black, like let's say some shot against h7 or something similar, but here actually it does work. So now white should have played e5 immediately, but she went queen a4 first. Yeah? I think a bit of a vague move. I mean, she defends the pawn, but the queen is really doing very little on a4. And from this moment, I will start explaining my moves and how I think, again, I would use this word smooth they were. And I think this smoothness came out as a result of this clarity in thinking that I had during the game, and a very nice merging of both pursuing my own plans and prophylactic thinking hindering my opponent's plans. So what I mean here? So the first move is a6. Okay, so a6, it's a natural move because well, at least natural to me, because you could see that black has 2 pawns against one on the queen side. So black's general plan is to play on the queen side, and the move a6 simply prepares the move b5. Yeah. So e5 now for white, because after b5 there would be just 3 attacks on the pawn on d4, so white needs to defend it. I drop back to e7. Now queen c2. She also drops back with tempo, hitting my pawn on h7, and I move another kind of a forced move g6. I play g6, not h6, in order to limit the activity of the light squared bishop. So now g6 is well protected. So rook ac1 by white. And now, again, what does black play? You could say that rook c8 is natural, and I would say yes, it is. But after rook c8, queen e2, white attacks the pawn on a6 with tempo. So I did not play rook a8, I actually played knight a5. And the point is that the rook stays on a8 for now, yeah, and the knight is removed from the c file, so rook c8 can come with the tempo, for example, and the knight is on a good square on a5, controlling the c4 and b3 squares, which are squares that black is targeting, for example, after b5, rook c8, knight c4. And the third point after knight a5 is that it comes with a tempo, because the threat of bishop f3 wrecking white's kingside shelter is a threat. So you see, my move is a natural. It pursues my plans of queenside play, but also comes with a tempo by attacking that knight on f3. So she went queen e2, defending the knight and also putting pressure on the pawn on a6. So now rook c8 is not possible, but black's play was intended to start on the queenside, so I play the move b5. So again, a natural move, a move that pursues my plan. Now she goes knight d2. Another move that pursues white's plan, which is to take advantage of the e4 square. So a knight on e4 can target f6, d6, c5, and so forth, or a bishop on d4 can exchange my strong light squared bishop. And now it's a very nice move that I played, which I think nicely combines both my play on the queen side and anticipates white's possible play with putting a piece on e4. I play the move bishop d5. And you see, this is the type of smooth chess that I think is basically ideal. And it consists of, like I said, pursuing of your own plan, which in this case is play on the queen side, and taking into account the opponent's ideas. And this is all based on short but precise calculation. So the lines I actually had to see when playing bishop d5 are not that many. Basically, I had to check what happens if either piece lands on e4. Yeah. So in case of bishop e4, my idea was to go rook a7 with the idea of queen a8, and then increase the pressure on the long diagonal, but also allow for the rook to join the game from d8 or c8 maybe, and so forth. And the rook on a7 can also come to d7, or in case of rook d8 also rook c7, doubling on the c file. So that was one move long variation I had to see. And the other one was in case of knight e4, the knight weakens the control over the c4 square, so I go knight c4, targeting that bishop on b2 and closing the c file. So no, knight c5 is not really a threat because the rook no longer controls that square. And then basically also the knight on c4 also attacks the knight on the pawn on a3, let's say. Yeah. So these are the lines I had to see to make sure that the move is good and it keeps control. So this combination, short, precise calculation of moves that pursue our own ideas, but at the same time taking into consideration the ideas by the opponent, is what I call smooth chess. And I think this, like I said at the beginning, this game is one of the smoothest ones I have played, and I will, in the remainder of the game I will show you also why. So white goes to rook c2. She decides not to put a piece on e4 for the time being and decides to double on the c file. Now again, taking into consideration that white wants to exert dominance on the c file, I play a natural move, rook c8, because by exchanging one pair of rooks, that control over the c file would not be very strong, and with a single rook white cannot do much. So rook fc1, I exchange one pair of rooks, rook takes c2, so now the control over the c file is not that scary without one rook, and I play the move queen a8. I mentioned the idea earlier, here also comes with a tempo, hitting the rook on the pawn on g2, and at the same time allowing the rook to join the game and again contest the c file. So again, it's called kind of flowing very nicely, yeah. And with each move, black is creating some threats, but at the same time still continuing this idea of play on the queen side. So in this moment, she decided to go knight e4 to block the long diagonal and defend the pawn on g2. But my reply was prepared even earlier. As I mentioned, the knight no longer controls the c4 square, so I just block the c file with the move knight c4. It was part of the plan, hitting the bishop on b2 and also the pawn on a3. At the same time, some calculation was required, because with the knight on e4, white can maybe go bishop c1 and then maybe start some attack against my king. So bishop h6, knight f6 check, and so forth. Maybe try to start some attack. And here it's important, again, the important role of calculation when in this smooth play is that while you're pursuing your plan, you must make sure that your opponent's plans are adequately met, and you confirm this by precise calculation. So, for example, in this position, after something like knight f6 check, I take on f6, ef6, I take on b2, and then I take on g2. Okay, and if queen e3, threatening some mates, for example, just king h8, and after rook g8, my king will be safe, whereas white's king is actually quite exposed, having lost the g2 pawn. So this is some, let's say, a sample line that I had to see before deciding on knight c4. And if that knight is eliminated, bishop takes e4, I actually take the knight on e4 with a double attack on the rook and the pawn on g2. So white plays bishop c1, and now it appears that, okay, there are some threats against my king, like I mentioned, bishop h6, knight f6, and so forth. But again, here, accurate calculation comes to the fore. Knight takes a3. In a way, it's a crowning of black's strategy of play on the queen side, because now white's queen side has been annihilated, no pawn presence there, and basically, long term, black obtains a winning advantage thanks to the two passed pawns there. But calculation was required to make sure that nothing dangerous happens to my king. So one line was to check was that in bishop a3, knight f6 check, after king g7, there is actually no danger here for a king. Yeah, then next the bishop can drop back to e7, eliminate the knight, and the king will be safe, whereas the g2 pawn still hangs and the pawns on the queen side are ready to move forward. So white played knight f6, and now again, precise calculation, but not too complicated. Yeah. For example, king g7 would be bad because after queen e3 the bishop stayed alive, so now queen h6 is a nasty threat. But I calculated a very simple variation that just kills off any threats that white may create on the king side and ensures safety of my position. So I basically eliminated the knight. Bishop takes f6. Now the rook is hanging, so white takes the knight on a3, and now it appears that maybe I have blundered because my rook is hanging on f8 and my bishop is hanging. But my idea was simply to go bishop g7, sacrifice the exchange, bishop f8, but look at the transformation. Yeah, I have two bishops, very powerful ones, g2 still hanging, but most importantly my dark squared bishop makes sure that my king is entirely safe, and I expect my pawns to decide the game. So you see, a small transformation, not too complicated calculation, but it actually still is this transformation is again pursuit of black's queenside play, which was set out from the beginning. So f3 now played by white to blunt the long diagonal, but now queen a7, immediately taking advantage of the weakening of the other diagonal by attacking the pawn on d4. So queen f2 defending the pawn, and now the pawn starts rolling b4. So you could see the narrative of the game. Yeah, the beginning of the whole plan for black was set out immediately after the opening, and it was dictated by the pawn structure when black had a majority on the queen side. And you see how with every move I tried to pursue this idea of playing on the queen side, but at the same time taking good note of white's threats, white's ideas, and having this very fine balance of pursuing my plan, but also keeping white's threats in check. So rook c8, it's clear that if white doesn't create any sort of counterplay against my king, then just the pawns will roll, the pawns cannot be stopped. So rook c8, the idea of the move is to go maybe queen h4, and then maybe queen h6, and try to attack my pinned bishop. So I again am very careful about white's threats, and I go king g7. The idea is of course to get out of the pin, and if let's say now if queen h4, then simply bishop e7 would attack the queen. So now white played bishop e4, trying to exchange my powerful and dominant bishop that also supports the advance of the pawn. And a funny thing happened here. I don't know why it happened, but it's hard to explain. But here my opponent offered me a draw. Well, I mean, it's clear that black is winning. But why she offered a draw, I just can't say. But sometimes, well, opponents could offer draws and like try to confuse you or kind of try to break your rhythm. Obviously, I refused. I played the move queen b7, which is a double attack, attacking the bishop on e4 and attacking the rook on c8. Now she went queen c2, defending the bishop on e4 and the rook on c8. But now I just calculated that I more or less win by force. Take on e4. Okay, only move taking with the pawn, because taking with the queen drops the rook. Yeah, so f takes e4 and b3, attacking the queen. And now the queen, if it just goes back to c1, then b2, and the queen cannot at the same time fight against the passed pawn and defend the rook. So she has to look for an exchange of queens. But now after the exchange, queen c6, rook c6, a5, the pawns are basically unstoppable. Yeah, they're just rolling with the support of the bishop. Yeah. So the idea, obviously, if something like, let's say, rook b6, bishop b4, and then the b pawn promotes. So she went rook c1, and I played a4, and then she resigned because the pawns cannot be stopped anymore. Yeah. So now you see why, perhaps you understand better why I like this game so much from my side, because it just felt so smooth. Yeah, and I again use this word of smooth, but it just has this very nice feeling of natural flow. Yeah, but this is how it looks on the surface. Yeah, under the surface, I try to explain some of the lines that I was basically forced to foresee, to calculate, and to make sure that the moves I played were actually were not mistakes. Yeah, and you do that by a careful calculation. So when the calculation, this short exact calculation, when it works, and when it works without any fail, then you can hope to play smooth chess. It doesn't always work, but you can hope. Yeah. So with this, I will just conclude this first video of the new year. I hope you understand better now why I wished to all of you smooth chess for 2025. Well, I hope we all achieve it in a bigger or lesser extent. Either way, here's to a great year ahead of us. I hope you continue to like my content. Keep on smashing that subscribe button and comment in the comment section. And also, try to be a bit more supportive if you wish by supporting me on Substack and becoming a paid subscriber there. This will mean a lot, and it would help me to produce even better and more content thanks to your support. So thanks for watching, and all the best for 2025, and you'll keep seeing me on a regular basis here. Take care all the best.